Hello and welcome to Faith Matters, the programme where we take a spiritual perspective on life across Merseyside. And today we're not in the studio, we're in Wallasey on the other side of the river at St Elizabeth's Church in Wallasey Cemetery. And our guests today are Father Paul Elliot, Irina, Burnip and John Egan from the Russian Orthodox community here. Father Paul, tell us a little bit about Orthodoxy, very briefly, its history, beliefs, practices.
The Orthodox Church is and believes itself to be the ancient church as it was at the time of the Apostles. It doesn't believe it has changed significantly since those times, and it was normally found in the Eastern Empire of the Roman Empire, and then it lived side by side with the Latins, with the Roman Catholic community, all in union. And then in 1054, the two kind of fell out with each other over certain matters of doctrine, in addition to the creed, the insistence of the papacy that we had a celibate priesthood and that we used wafers in the Eucharist and not leavened bread as we'd always used. So by 1054 we fell out sufficiently to break communion with each other, and we've stayed very much separate until in 1966 the anathemas were lifted between the papacy and Orthodoxy, and we've lived rather more peacefully with each other in recent times. So we're still not in formal communion with each other.
Okay, so I understand the Orthodox tradition. I mean, there's different kinds of Orthodox. Aren't there? Rerussian, Greek, Armenian. I've got that right.
Ethiopians call themselves Orthodox.
Okay, so that it is a growing tradition in the UK.
In the UK, mainly through Eastern European migration,
yeah.
There have been a great deal of opening of Orthodox parishes, particularly in the last 10 years. Before that, you've got waves of people that came here. So you've got, after the Russian Revolution, in the 1920s, there was a whole wave of Russians who came and lived here. And then, after the Second World War, many Russians who fought in the Free Russian armies on the side of the Allies chose to decline Stalin's kind offer of going back to the Soviet Union and stayed in the UK. And then after the invasion of Cyprus in, I think, 1974, there was an influx of somewhere in the region of 250,000 Greek Cypriot citizens who came to live in the United Kingdom, and they founded all their parishes and so on. So you've had waves of people coming from Eastern Europe and from Greece. And finally, of course, you've got, with the opening of the European Union, you have, for instance, a Romanian parish formally opened 2 weeks ago, which is in the next cemetery chapel down,
really?
In Town Lane.
Well, maybe we're going to do a programme there.
Yeah. And so these little parishes are growing up now all over the country.
Okay, so Irina, you're Russian.
I am, yes.
How long have you been in the UK?
I've been here since 1992. This is when I came and married my English husband, so 23 years ago.
But Father Paul was telling me it's only really since you've been in the UK where you've taken the church more seriously. Is that correct? What's your story?
That's very true. Well, I grew up in the Soviet Union, in the, say, atheist country, so where any kind of religious belief was not particularly approved. Even though I was always interested in all matters spiritual. So it's only when I came here and decided to have my daughter baptized that I found Father Paul's church, which at the time, nearly 10 years ago now, was in Father Paul's house. in the basement of his house here in Birkenhead. Well, we all came here, well, my husband and my 2 children, and just fell in love with it. Immediately felt like home. And when I first thought about having my daughter baptized, I just thought, well, I have to do it. Well, like people baptize their children, and since I'm Russian, why not do it in the Russian church? And I didn't plan to stay in the church like a lot of people do. They just have their children baptized and never go back there. But here I am, 10 years on, and very devoted to our little church and our whole community, of course, but Father Paul too.
I'm not leaving you out, John, because I'm going to come to you in the second half and ask your story, because you're a relatively new convert to Orthodoxy. Just want to come back to Father Paul now, and you started out as an Anglican priest, is that?
I did, yes.
Yeah. So what led you briefly into...
Depends on whether you want the long story or the short.
I think as we've only got 5 minutes, we'll have the short story.
The short story was that I studied the history of liturgy and worship at university at a very high level, and my parish priest, who was Father Morton, who was an Anglican liturgist, told me that I was going to study Orthodoxy, and my part of my homework was to go to the Church of St Olave's in Exeter, where I went, and I suddenly felt utterly and completely at home. And I fought off this for some time, and finally Father Morton told me to go to Mount Athos in Greece, which is a monastic republic in Greece, and I met a monk who shone, literally shone with light, and he told me that I would become an Orthodox priest. I wasn't Orthodox at the time, I was 21 at the time, and he also told me to marry my Jane, my wife. And while I obeyed him in terms of marrying Jane, it took me 7 years to obey him to finally become Orthodox.
Now that's interesting, because that sounds to me like what charismatics might call a prophetic word.
Yes.
And I know, from my own background in charismatic Christianity, that a number of charismatic priests and indeed lay people have come over to the Orthodox tradition, including Michael Harper, now deceased, who is a key figure in Anglican charismatic renewal. What do you think the connection is there with the charismatic experience, the Orthodox experience?
I'm not sure, except that when I speak to charismatic Christians, I actually think that they understand me and I understand them. And if you attend an Orthodox liturgy, sometimes, I can't say all times, but sometimes there is a great intensity of the Spirit being present at the Orthodox liturgy. And in that way, it can be a charismatic experience to come to the Orthodox liturgy. And I remember being in a little village in Greece, and when the little women come in, the little old ladies, they don't piously sit down like they do in an Anglican church. They actually put their arms in the air and greet the Saviour, whose the icon is in the dome. And they put their arms up like this, and you think, goodness, this is a free person. This is somebody saying hello to their Saviour in a very physical and a very demonstrative way. And then I think that there are some similarities in that way between charismatic Christianity.
So it's the experiential, the physicality.
I think there's an experiential, yes, and a kind of understanding that we're doing something extraordinary and not ordinary. We're entering into something different, completely different, and not just run-of-the-mill, let's get it over with, because we'll do it for 2 hours or 2.5
hours.
Let's not just do a quick mass here.
And you can come in and out, is that
people
right?
Do, yes. I have people, some dedicated ones, who come very early.
It's like Irina.
I don't know about that.
But
I'm usually late.
some of my people are magnificently late.
Yeah.
I have learned that there is something called standard Russian time, which means that you arrive when you arrive. You don't necessarily arrive.
Standard Bulgarian time.
Standard Bulgarian is even more magnificent.
Just to finish this part of the programme, you have a high theology of the Spirit as well, don't you?
We do. Yes. And actually, the part of the Divine Liturgy where the calling down of the Holy Spirit upon the gifts is in the Russian Rite in particular the holiest part of the liturgy.
Right, well, thank you for this, for speaking. I'm sorry that Irina didn't get much time to speak, and John, we are coming to you, but we'll definitely have more of you in the second half. So join us for Faith Matters for the second half after the commercial break. Welcome back to Faith Matters. Today we're outside the studio. We're at St Elizabeth's Church in Wallasey with the priest and two members of the Russian Orthodox community there, Father Paul, Irina and John. John, I'd like you to begin this part of the programme with you telling your story, because you're a recent convert to Orthodoxy. You grew up as a Roman Catholic, you've got Irish descent, you're from Liverpool. What made you take that journey?
In many ways, it echoes what Father Paul was saying. I was in Russia 30 years ago. It was a weird, strange visit through work and a twinning arrangement with a project in Leningrad, as it then was, St. Petersburg. We were there for a week. It was a Sunday. There weren't many Catholic churches that I could find. And in fact, there were very few Orthodox churches. Most of them had been converted into museums of atheism or gymnasiums, or were just desecrated and empty. So after a lot of searching, we found the Alexander Nevsky Monastery in Leningrad. And we attended Divine Liturgy, myself and a couple of friends, one of whom was Anglican and the other was Catholic. And it was that extraordinary experience. It was overwhelming, it was overpowering. It was that sense that you had arrived somewhere that was where the idea of the sacred was still fundamental to faith. And it was the beauty of Orthodox liturgy. And beauty, I don't think, is a superficial aspect or quality of Orthodoxy. I think it's a deep theological idea, because I think it reveals something profound and true about creation and our part within creation, and our responsibilities within creation as well. So it was a very long journey, and what was pulling me back, I think, was that sense of Catholicism being more than simply a kind of choice of affiliation. It is very much part of identity if you come from an Irish Catholic background. So you're not just leaving a church, in some sense you're leaving an entire sense of who you are, where you come from, your family, your antecedents, your politics. It's all embedded in that sense of Irish Catholicism. So it was a painfully slow journey, but throughout that period there was a little voice saying to me, "You're in the wrong church. You know where home is." And it's, before it gets too late, you got to make.
So it took you kind of 30 years.
It did, yeah.
I suppose in the kind of the way that in God's economy, that's maybe not very long.
It's not very long.
Now you've got a background, obviously I know that you've got a background in creativity. You were in a band some years ago, the Revolutionary Army of the Infant Jesus, that had a lot of iconography and attached to it. And I remember seeing a lot of Orthodoxy even in that. Was that after you went to Russia or before?
It was actually, funnily enough, the other two members of the band who were on that trip with me, who went to the same liturgy. I think it all had a profound experience, a profound impact on us. And I think we became enormously interested in and hugely influenced by the idea of icons, because icons aren't holy pictures. They're not simply devotional objects. Icons are a kind of instruction in Orthodox theology. They are depictions of the glorified and transfigured creation. They're windows into heaven, but they're also windows from heaven into the world. And it's that transfigurative responsibility that I think is at the core of what art should be. Art should be sacramental. Art should be the rediscovery and a kind of restoration of what the real purpose and the real glory of creation is meant to be. So it was hugely important, both in terms of a very long and painstaking faith journey, but where it had more of an immediate impact was on influencing creativity and the musical work I was doing at that time.
And you sing in the choir here, I understand.
Yes.
They both do.
Yeah, you both
Yes.
do. You sing in the choir, Irina?
I do as well.
Yeah.
They both do.
I enjoy it really.
Okay, so Irina, tell us about, we're in the season of Advent, just entered the season of Advent.
Of course.
By the time we show this, we'll be well into the season of Advent, probably. Just, you know, what is it? Is there any, what are you doing here for Advent, and how does it differ? What are the similarities, and what perhaps are the dissimilarities? Perhaps between you could answer that question.
Well, to begin with, because we live not in an Orthodox country, so Advent for me started with boxes of chocolates, which I used to buy for my children. So on the 1st of December, so to open each little window and have a chocolate piece of chocolate until Christmas. And I think that still goes on. That they still go to the shops and look out for chocolate Advent calendars. But as for the Orthodox Church preparation for Christmas, then we actually have a fast, so which started 3 days ago, so which is not as strict as the Lent before Easter. But we are not supposed to eat meat, and there are days during meat to dairy, but fish and oil are sometimes allowed. So difficult as it is, we try to observe it. But of course we exchange gifts and we all go shopping for presents for our friends and family. The thing to mention is that the Russian Christmas comes 2 weeks later than the English one, or the Western one, maybe is the right way to say it. Is that correct, Father Paul? We follow Julian calendar,
Julian
is that
calendar.
correct? Yes.
13 days difference.
13 days difference.
And why is that, Father Paul? Why are you later than us, as it were?
Because there's something called the indiction, and the indiction was when St. Constantine proclaimed at the Council of Nicaea that we should follow a particular calendar. And the calendar that was adopted was the Julian calendar devised by Julius Caesar. But it is sanctified by the ecumenical councils. So the Russians, who don't change anything, decided not to change the calendar at the same time as the Greeks and the Romanians and the Arabs. So we still have, along with the Serbs, the traditional Orthodox calendar. We're still in. So it's 13 days different. And December the 25th in the Julian calendar is January the 7th. So our midnight service is on January the 6th in the evening, where we have 12 readings from the prophets, and it starts in darkness, the service, and it's very, very beautiful. It's very, very long. And then we have the nativity celebrations the next morning. But you can make your Holy Communion twice, because there's 2 different Gospels and 2 different epistles.
And the season of Epiphany is also quite important for you.
Yes, that's Theophany. We call it Theophany. And the year before last I went and blessed the Mersey, didn't we? We went down and blessed the Mersey, much to the stumblance of New Brighton. However, so we did it. And but that's on the 19th of January for the Russian Church, not the 6th of January, so it's 13 days beyond the 6th.
And there's blessings of the waters in the church.
And then I, in theory, go right round your houses and bless everybody's house.
Right, yes, yeah. We'll all come with a bottle to collect some water from the bowl that's being blessed by Father Paul in our church. And it's very exciting.
So everyone is truly blessed.
Yeah, in theory.
So a lot of people escaping from Syria and that kind of region where a lot of these people are Orthodox.
Yes, they are. Yes. Around about there's around about 30% of Syrians are Christian, and a high proportion of those are Orthodox.
And have you had any contact with them?
No, we've not as such, because there's an Arab church in Manchester, and in the main Father Gregory supports those refugees. So if anything, we've had more contact with Ukrainian and Russians over the difficulties in Crimea and in Ukraine. But we do raise money. We raise money this Sunday. Everything that was in the collection this past Sunday is going to New York to be distributed for charity.
So how many are you on a Sunday?
Between 25 and 30, but there were a few more on Sunday, and there were about 40 on Sunday.
We're going to be on the telly, so it became quite
And you get quite a lot of people, visitors coming along? Because I mean, having come over here myself,
yes,
I'm thinking
yes,
I'm definitely coming back.
We have visitors, yes, and they don't receive Holy Communion. Only Orthodox people who are prepared for Holy Communion would be invited to receive Holy Communion, yes.
But we could have a blessing, a personal
Yes,
blessing.
and actually there's a leftover from the early church called blessed bread, which when I cut up the loaves for Holy Communion, I cut out a certain part of it, it's called the lamb, and the rest of it is then cut up into small pieces and put in a basket, and is distributed to the whole congregation at the end.
And what time do you meet?
About 10 o'clock.
Around 10 o'clock.
Standard Russian time starts when it starts.
Thank you very much. It's been great to come and join you here at St Elizabeth's Church, to come over the water to the other side, as it were, and join you today. And just thank you so much for having us, and we'd love to come back again and maybe do something else.